Imagine you're working on something, something super crucial, and suddenly your laptop just completely freezes.
Oh yeah, that instant sinking feeling in your stomach.
Right. Total system failure. The dreaded blue screen of death.
Yeah.
But think about how you actually handle that moment. You don't try to negotiate with the pixels on the monitor, right?
No, I mean, you definitely don't yell at the screen to change its mind. You know the screen is just a display.
Exactly. So you look at the hardware, you force a reboot of the operating system, or you try to figure out if there's like a bug in the underlying code.
Right, you immediately shift into an engineering mindset. You address the system's architecture rather than just getting mad at the surface level image.
Yes, exactly. But when it comes to human existence, I mean, our bodies, our recorded history, the literal universe we live in, we usually just stare at the pixels.
We really do. We
Mm.
treat reality like it's a locked black box, like it's the finished product that we just have to, passively endure.
Well, today, we are taking you past the screen and straight into the source code of reality itself. We're going to apply that exact IT troubleshooting mindset to human consciousness.
Which is such a fascinating approach. We're unpacking a massive interdisciplinary framework called Universal Synchrony by Devaldo Lemos da Costa.
And it is an incredibly ambitious synthesis. I mean, we're merging computer systems, engineering, quantum physics, biology, and ancient theology to decode what the author calls the engineering of existence.
It really is a sweeping vision. We are going to examine the universe as a cosmic network, human bodies as biological hardware, and consciousness as the software running on that hardware.
But to do that, to really get into this deep dive, we have to establish some ground rules for how we navigate the material with you.
Yeah.
The framework asks us to practice strict epistemological humility.
Right, which basically means we aren't asking you to accept this as absolute, unquestionable dogma, but we also aren't approaching it with a cynical, knee-jerk dismissal.
Yeah, we're simply putting on our engineering hats and exploring the mechanics of a really fascinating hypothesis.
And that humility is essential because, as the framework points out, if you look at history, the established scientific consensus is frequently and sometimes catastrophically wrong.
So wrong.
Yeah. Before we can even look at the mechanics of this universal IT system, we have to pierce what is called the institutional veil of Maya.
The veil of Maya. So the pervasive illusion that whatever the current institutional consensus happens to be is the absolute final truth.
Exactly. To break that illusion, the text outlines 21 historical examples where the dominant consensus violently clashed with actual reality.
And the modern examples are honestly pretty sobering, like the thalidomide tragedy in the 1950s.
Right, the medical consensus at the time simply assumed that the placental barrier was an impenetrable mechanical shield.
They didn't even test the drug for causing birth defects before mass commercialization, just because the prevailing paradigm said, oh, it's not necessary.
Or consider Radithor in the early 1900s. Radiation was this newly discovered, highly publicized physical
A
phenomenon.
hot new thing.
Literally. Because it was the exciting new paradigm, doctors were prescribing radioactive water as a vitality tonic.
It's crazy to think about now.
It ended up causing horrific radiation poisoning, of course. But the consensus drove the application long before the actual mechanisms were understood.
And you see the exact same pattern with the shifting dogmas on trans fats. For decades, official global health guidelines promoted hydrogenated vegetable oils over saturated fats.
Paradoxically fueling the exact cardiovascular diseases they were trying to prevent.
Right, and the historical examples show how deeply entrenched this professional pride gets. Think about Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1840s.
The hand-washing pioneer.
Yeah, he noticed that if doctors washed their hands with chlorine, maternal mortality just plummeted. He proposed the existence of cadaverous particles.
But because that idea offended the pride of the medical elite, he was mocked. He was fired. He ultimately died in an asylum.
And decades later, germ theory proved exactly what he was saying. Or Aristarchus of Samos, who mathematically proposed a heliocentric solar system 18 centuries before Copernicus.
18 centuries. But he was basically silenced because the Ptolemaic Earth-centric model was the untouchable institutional consensus.
Okay, but hold on, I have to push back a little here. If we're pointing to old medical disasters and historical blind spots, isn't that just proof that the scientific method actually works?
How do you mean?
Well, science eventually fixed those mistakes, right? We aren't still bleeding people with leeches to balance their humors. It feels a bit extreme to use past errors to claim that modern consensus is currently broken.
That's a very fair point, and it's a crucial distinction to make here. The critique in universal synchrony isn't against the scientific method itself. The scientific method is a brilliant tool.
Okay.
The target of this critique is scientism, which is when the scientific method degrades into an unquestionable dogma, like an institutional religion. To explain the difference, the framework uses a precise concept from law regarding how a case is archived.
Oh, interesting. How does a legal term map onto scientific research?
Well, in law, a case can be archived for a genuine insufficiency of evidence. You investigate, you look for proof, and there just isn't enough to proceed. That is healthy science.
Right. You ran the test and the data just wasn't there.
Exactly. But a case can also be archived for convenience. This happens when investigating a topic threatens established funding, prestige, or a dominant paradigm.
Oh, like the tobacco industry. They spent decades engineering doubt to protect their paradigm. That was archiving for convenience.
Precisely. They didn't bury the truth because they investigated it and found it false. They buried it so they wouldn't have to investigate it and risk their status.
That makes a lot of sense.
And this is why this framework argues that borderline topics, things like near-death experiences, unidentified anomalous phenomena, or the collective unconscious, deserve a fair, open trial.
Because they are frequently archived for convenience, simply because investigating them makes the current institutional consensus profoundly uncomfortable.
Yes. So once you accept that the current consensus might have some major blind spots, you can actually look at the alternative architecture this framework proposes for human existence.
And it completely abandons the traditional philosophical debate of mind versus body. Instead, it presents a trichotomic architecture, a triad that is straight out of computer science.
It's a highly functional model. It requires three fundamental components to operate, plus the data it accumulates over time.
So let's break down this hardware and software.
First, you have the spirit. In this IT model, the spirit is the firmware. It is the original immutable code from the architect.
So it operates exactly like read-only memory or ROM. It holds a perfect, unalterable frequency.
Right. And it never gets corrupted, traumatized, or degraded by the physical world.
And sitting on top of that, you have the soul. The soul is the local operating system, the OS, that is instanced in your specific body.
Unlike the firmware, the OS is mutable. It acts like RAM. Because it is constantly interacting with the physical environment, it can accumulate bugs, trauma, and noise over time.
The physical substrate that actually runs this local OS is the body, the hardware.
And finally, you have knowledge. Knowledge represents the apps and data you install over a lifetime. It is entirely transient. It's just learned information.
It makes me think of buying a brand new analog synthesizer keyboard. The physical keys and the circuitry. That's the hardware.
Okay, I like this analogy.
The internal programming that tells it how to generate a perfect sine wave, that's the firmware. It's flawless. But as you use it, you tweak the knobs, you layer on distortion pedals, you save weird patches. That's the local OS getting messy.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And if you spill coffee on it later, the core mathematical programming didn't break, the hardware is just glitching and the local patches are distorted.
That's a great way to visualize it. To ground this philosophically, the framework looks at a 3-minute-old baby.
Oh, the baby paradox.
Right. This baby has functional hardware, the body, and a perfectly functioning local OS, the soul. But it has absolutely zero apps installed. It has zero knowledge.
Which resolves a centuries-old philosophical paradox by proving that consciousness does not equal knowledge.
Exactly. You can be fully conscious, running the operating system flawlessly, without having learned a single piece of data yet.
And what's fascinating is how this maps perfectly across global religions. The text points out that these ancient traditions have been describing this exact same IT infrastructure for millennia.
Just using different cultural vocabularies, the structural parallels are undeniable.
Like in early Christian theology, there is a clear distinction between pneuma, the incorruptible spirit, and psyche, the individual soul that can suffer, learn, and be redeemed.
Which maps perfectly to the firmware and the mutable local OS. And you see the exact same architectural hierarchy in Hinduism.
Between the supreme, untouched Atman and the individualized, experiential Jivatman.
The terminology changes based on the geography, but the systems engineering remains completely identical.
Which brings us to a massive question. If this firmware is broadcasting a perfect, uncorrupted signal, but our local OS is down here accumulating bugs, where is the physical Wi-Fi receiver in the human body?
Right, how does wet biological hardware actually pick up a non-local signal?
Yeah. The framework points to very specific biophysical mechanisms for this interface.
It focuses on three primary components. The primary receiver, the literal antenna, is the pineal gland in the brain.
Which usually just gets talked about in terms of regulating melatonin, our sleep cycles.
It does regulate sleep, but the mechanism we care about here involves appetite microcrystals located within the gland.
Okay.
These crystals possess piezoelectric properties.
Wait, piezoelectricity? Like I know that from acoustic guitar pickups or those long click lighters for the grill?
Yeah, the exact same principle.
You strike a crystal, it undergoes mechanical stress, and it sparks an electrical charge. How on earth does that translate to the brain?
Well, the hypothesis is that these microcrystals vibrate in resonance with non-local quantum frequencies, the signal from the firmware.
Oh, wow.
That mechanical vibration in the crystal generates an electrical charge, which physically translates a quantum signal into a localized electrical neural impulse that your brain's hardware can actually process.
But just like any physical antenna, it requires maintenance, right? The argument is that this gland can become calcified by environmental factors like heavy metals or fluoride.
Which basically coats the receiver in static and drops your signal strength.
So what's the second component?
The second major component is the heart, which operates as a Faraday cage.
Okay, in electronics, a Faraday cage is an enclosure that blocks external electromagnetic interference.
Right, and the human heart is a massive electromagnetic oscillator. The framework suggests that when the heart is in a state of deep coherence, which you can achieve through specific practices.
Like a 5-second inhale and 5-second exhale, paired with a genuine felt sense of gratitude.
Exactly. When you do that, it generates a highly structured electromagnetic field.
So you're basically building a psychic Faraday cage around your local OS. And the purpose of this cage is to protect you from downloading what the text calls orphan scripts.
Orphan scripts, yes. These are essentially residual trauma data. Fragments of corrupted code left in the localized cosmic cloud by other events or other people.
Think about what this means for you in your daily life. Have you ever walked into a room or walked past someone on the street and suddenly felt this heavy, sinking anxiety for absolutely no logical reason?
We all have. And under this framework, that might not even be your anxiety.
Right. If your heart is in chaos, your Faraday cage drops, and you just unconsciously downloaded someone else's background noise.
That's the practical application of this.
Yep.
You're constantly interfacing with the field, which brings us to the third component, our DNA, which acts as the modem.
A modem, because the physical structure of DNA is a fractal, right?
Yes, and in antenna design, a fractal shape maximizes the surface area to receive and transmit an incredibly wide range of frequencies.
The mechanism here is that DNA emits ultra-weak packets of light called biophotons. It is literally using light particles to transmit data back and forth with the quantum field.
To measure how well this entire interface is working, how well your DNA modem, your heart's Faraday cage, and your pineal antenna are syncing up, the framework uses something called the R coefficient.
The R coefficient. It measures the synchronization between your local OS and the perfect firmware.
And the metrics are quite revealing. An R coefficient below 0.30 signifies severe trauma.
So the system is out of sync.
Right, running highly corrupted code, and the hardware is suffering. Now, an R of 0.50 represents the average human experience.
You are functioning, but there is constant friction and static.
But if you clear the cache and get your R above 0.80, you achieve exceptional synchronization. In this state, you can bypass the need for apps altogether and access unlearned knowledge directly from the firmware.
This is where we have to talk about Derek Caravicini, because his story grounds this entirely in reality.
Oh, his story's incredible.
Derek was born extremely premature, completely blind, and with severe autism. Yet, at the age of 3, he could hear a complex Rachmaninoff piano concerto on the radio once, sit down at a keyboard, and play it back perfectly.
Under conventional materialistic science, that is incredibly difficult to explain. He had no formal training. He hadn't installed the musical apps, so to speak.
Right. You can't just learn Rachmaninoff at age 3 without being able to see the keys or read sheet music.
But if we look at it through the universal synchrony framework, Derek didn't learn music at all.
Because his conventional sensory applications were bypassed by his condition, his local OS synced directly with the firmware's inherent mathematical and musical frequency.
Exactly. The music wasn't learned data. It was a direct download.
But if he is downloading this unlearned knowledge, where is the server? What exactly is this cosmic cloud that the firmware is pulling from?
That server is what ancient Eastern traditions call the Akasha. In the terminology of this framework, it is the static informational matrix.
Informational. with an E.
Right, and the word informational is key here. It's not just passive information. It is data that has the potential to form reality.
It is a non-temporal server that stores all possibilities, all data past, present, and future in a localized quantum superposition.
Which completely blows up the centuries-old philosophical war between free will and determinism.
I love this part. It solves the paradox by showing how both exist simultaneously.
The mechanism is like a video game engine. All the code, every possible map, every possible outcome of your character's choices is already written and sitting on the game server.
The server has pre-computed every timeline. That is determinism.
But the server doesn't force you down a hallway. You, holding the controller, freely choose where to walk.
And as you make a choice, the game engine renders that specific hallway into your visible reality. Your focus, your specific frequency, collapses one of those pre-computed possibilities into your lived experience.
That is free will. You are free to choose, but whatever you choose to render was already waiting as a mathematical possibility on the static informational matrix.
Okay, now, if our individual bodies are the local hardware connecting to this Akasha server, the framework scales this up significantly.
It does. It suggests the Earth itself is a giant server hosting all of this biology.
And just like a massive corporate server, the Earth has undergone some intense system reboots.
We're talking about the 4.54 billion years of Earth's history. This framework argues that this isn't just a slow, linear timeline of random geology.
It is a literal system log of planetary resets. It views global cataclysms as Format C commands hard resets executed by the system to clear out degraded hardware and corrupted software.
It maps these resets to the major extinction events. The Permian and Cretaceous extinctions, the Younger Dryas period, which corresponds heavily with global flood myths.
Yeah.
And it places a massive emphasis on the Toba supervolcano eruption approximately 74,000 years ago.
The Toba eruption is just wild to think about. It created a severe genetic bottleneck. Humanity was reduced to somewhere between maybe 1,000 and 10,000 breeding individuals globally.
In the context of universal synchrony, a bottleneck like Toba wasn't just random tectonic bad luck. It was a massive clearing of the civilizational cache. The hardware was severely pared down.
It's like when your home internet router completely stops working and the tech support guy tells you to unfold a paperclip and shove it into that tiny reset hole in the back to wipe the memory.
Oh, that's good.
The Toba supervolcano was basically the Earth's paperclip.
That is a very apt analogy.
Yeah.
And what this implies is that there were earlier, higher voltage versions of humanity pre-Adamic hardware running on the Earth server prior to these hard resets.
The framework points to O-parts, or out-of-place artifacts, as fragmented evidence of this, like the Oklo nuclear reactor in Gabon.
Right. Mainstream geology calls it a naturally occurring nuclear fission reactor from 2 billion years ago.
But it operated with a level of self-regulating precision that heavily suggests engineered system design.
Or you look at things like the Sumerian king list, an ancient text which casually records pre-flood kings ruling for tens of thousands of years.
And the hypothesis is that after these massive traumatic resets, human processing splintered into 3 distinct lineages as a survival mechanism.
First, you have the vertical lineage. These were operators who maintained high coherence and migrated to orbital protocols or higher frequencies to avoid the surface resets.
And the framework links them to the source of UAP phenomena.
Then you have the horizontal lineage. These were the survivors who literally dug in, building massive underground bunker systems.
You look at the ancient multi-level subterranean city of Derinkuyu in Turkey. It could house 20,000 people and their livestock underground.
Yep.
That is the literal architecture of a horizontal lineage.
And finally, the surface lineage. That is us. The framework proposes that we are the survivors running in a degraded, low-voltage environment.
Because the planetary hardware has been so traumatized by resets, we operate with a sensory amnesia patch.
Which provides an explanation for why roughly 90% of our DNA is seemingly dormant. What modern genetics originally classified as junk DNA.
It's not junk. It's deactivated hardware running in power-saving mode.
Exactly. And when you start looking at global mythology through this lens, everything starts to click together in a way that gives you chills.
It really does. The text takes isolated cultural myths from totally different continents and overlays them, and they suddenly look like identical system logs.
It fundamentally shifts how you read mythology. Consider the Hopi tradition in North America, which speaks reverently of the ant people who took them underground to shelter them during planetary cataclysms.
That is a clear, localized memory of interacting with the horizontal lineage.
Or the Dogon tribe in West Africa. For centuries, they knew the precise orbit and density of the star Sirius B, which is completely invisible to the naked eye.
They knew this long before optical telescopes were invented in Europe, and they claimed they were given this knowledge by beings who descended from the sky.
Which maps perfectly to the vertical lineage.
Yep.
And then you have the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, who extensively documented the Anunnaki as the literal engineers of the human form.
The power of the synthesis is that it doesn't treat these stories as separate, primitive fairy tales. It treats them as fragmented, localized data logs of the exact same planetary resets and lineage interventions.
So true.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground here today. We've gone from the institutional blind spots in medicine to the piezoelectric crystals in your brain, all the way to underground ancient bunkers and the Akasha cloud server rendering reality.
It's a lot to process.
For you, listening right now, how do we bring this all together? What is the ultimate practical takeaway from the universal synchrony hypothesis?
The ultimate takeaway is a radical shift in personal agency. You are not a passive victim of a random, chaotic universe. You are an active co-engineer of reality.
Your firmware is perfect, but your local OS requires your active maintenance.
The vital thing to understand is that the universe, the static informational matrix, does not give you what you want. It mathematically renders the frequency that you are.
If you emit a frequency of chaos and stress, the server collapses a timeline of chaos for you to walk into.
But if you maintain the coherence of your biological hardware, you sync with the architect's original flawless code.
It really makes you rethink everything, from your morning routine to how you handle a terrible day at work. Think about your own biology.
It's all connected.
If your DNA is truly a fractal antenna, and your heart physically creates an electromagnetic Faraday cage that protects your operating system, what orphan scripts or background cosmic noise are you unconsciously downloading right now simply by letting yourself live in a state of chronic stress?
That is the exact question you should carry with you. If this biological hardware is real, and the Akasha is simply waiting to render whatever signal you transmit, what reality might you instantly collapse into existence if you intentionally change the channel to gratitude?
It goes right back to staring at that blue screen of death on your laptop. You can sit there and panic at the pixels, or you can finally learn how to rewrite the code. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into universal synchrony. Keep exploring the true engineering of your own existence.